thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. The human drama of athletic competition. That is what I hope to approach today. If you are male and live in America, you're probably at least aware of, if not deeply infected with March Madness. March Madness, as it is known in these parts, is the basketball championship of various universities throughout our country. And in our house, currently Frank has been watching since Thursday. The television has been on at least one of the 4 channels that is televising the many, many matches of young boys playing their hearts out. Now, I've always known that Frank has been a sports fan. When we met, I was aware that he was a Laker fan. I'd have previous boyfriends who were also fanatics of their own teams, so being a fan was not an issue for me necessarily, but I do remember one day after moving to Seattle, I came home to watching him, or rather him watching baseball. Now, I hadn't really known that Frank was a baseball fan. In fact, he doesn't really like it unless we're actually out in the baseball stadium ourselves. And he was very intensely paying attention to this particular game, and it did not compute when I walked in the door. I just was like, what? Baseball? You don't even like it. What are you doing? And once there was a play and there was a moment that he could look away and talk to me, he turned around and said, honey, I have a confession. I am a sports fan. Not just his Lakers, which I was aware of, or particularly UCLA in the college sports arena, but any sport. If people are moving, he was going to be watching them. So that was an interesting thing I had to contend with. I hadn't really, at that point, we'd been together about 6 years. I hadn't been aware that that was such a condition that you could have, being a sports fan. Now, we had a nice conversation a couple weeks ago regarding his interest in sports as I was preparing this presentation. And he mentioned to me that when he was 5 years old, I believe, his parents took him to a cousin's high school football game in Kentucky. And this young, impressionable 5-year-old, can you imagine seeing these big guys with their outfits out on the field battling each other? Certainly left an impression, to the point where when it was time for him to be able to join a league, the what do they call it? It wasn't the Little League of sports. His parents said yes, of course, and he thus began his long career, as it were, in early sports fandom, as well as being an athlete himself, up until he got to the 10th grade, and he stopped growing. He was a fantastic athlete. In fact, he even made it into the local papers. Unfortunately, some of those articles and clip-outs that his mom had kept were lost in a tornado a couple years ago. That's another story, very sad, but he definitely made the papers. He was quite the athlete, like I said, until about 10th grade, where he stopped growing, and thus he switched and became more interested in other arenas. Okay, he doesn't agree. I'm trying to summarize here and go quickly. In any case, my inkling is when he switched to being a fan more than just the performer himself. One of the events that culminated in that was the 1979 NCAA championship with Bird versus Magic. And as I was doing a little research for this presentation, I learned that this was the highest rated televised college basketball game of all time. So this event was really highly anticipated by many people, of course. Magic Johnson being the showboat, the really razzle-dazzle guy, and Bird being kind of an introvert and just actually very quiet and moderate in his speaking to the public. He just would show up and perform. So these two personalities and their athletic prowess coming on the court was quite an event. Everybody watched it, and of course, being so televised and widely available, I think a lot of people were really moved to pick a team. And of course, after the championship game, both of them went on to very successful careers with the NBA. Magic, of course, with the Lakers, and Larry Bird with the Boston Celtics. So from there, I think maybe he got attached to the Lakers, being the sport that I knew he was very, very into when I met him. My own personal history with sports is ambivalent. When I was very young, let's say about 7 to 10 years old, we would, play a lot in our neighborhood with the neighborhood kids. We used to have foot races to see who would, go from one light post to the next. And invariably, I used to always win those. I was pretty darn fast. In middle school, a couple folks saw that in gym class, that I was pretty good and pretty fast, and they approached me to be on the track team. Of course, I was very shy and conscious of my body, and I just didn't really think that that would be appropriate for me to be putting on these small shorts and running around a track with all sorts of people watching me. It just didn't appeal to me. So as I grew up and in high school, my one interest with photography led me to the college yearbook, or sorry, the high school yearbook. And as the photographer, I had to go to every sports game. So growing up in Garland, Texas, I was very aware of the Friday Night Lights phenomenon. There's not a whole lot else going on that's wholesome on a Friday night that the whole family can go to other than football. And of course, people are very rabid about their teams. So I went to every football game, but more as a documentarian. So I was hanging out with the band, hanging out with the cheerleaders, hanging out with the parents and the kids under the bleachers that were doing not so great things. So I was kind of around a lot of different aspects as well as the sports. And to be honest, even then, I wasn't really as interested in the action as I was in the scene and the environment. My one athletic prowess, if you could call it that, was to be a geek in the academic decathlon. So I got a letter jacket, if you can believe it, because I was technically in a sport, being in the academic decathlon. And funny story about the dealing with adversity and the agony of defeat. The final question, I was in a big room with tons of other students. This was the local championship of sorts, and there was a math category. And there was a question put up on the board, dozens of us students there in the stadium ready to answer this question. And I forget what the question was. Let's just say for the sake of it, it was, what is the square root of 42? And as I reached for my pencil, I was kind of nervous, and I knocked it over the desk, and it rolled off and fell. And as I reached for it, I went to grab it, and I knew the answer. And right at that moment where I was going to fill in the dot on the Scantron, time out, no more time, put your pencils down. And that one question lost our team the one championship there, where we could have gone on to regionals. So that was my agony of defeat in mental games. Moving on, as I was approaching college, I did a lot of research and applied to several schools that were very choice, at least in the rankings, in terms of engineering. And as I approached my father to see, what he would approve of course, Worcester Polytechnical Institute, Harvey Mudd, we never heard of those places. But USC, oh yeah, those Trojans, they have a really good football team. You should go there. And as I was kind of thinking about it, it's like, all right, well, New York, cold, Los Angeles, sunny. My dad says it's okay, even though it's more expensive. I guess I'll go to USC. So as you know, or you may be aware, they are a very, very powerful force in college sports. And I have to admit, I've actually never been to a football game. I went to USC, rabid football school, and I've never been to a game. So with that, just to wrap up my presentation here, just reckoning with sports and what they mean to our lives. They're obviously very important to Frank. Not always as important to me, but they exist, and I have to reckon with them. So there is the good, the discipline and the teamwork that it takes to coach young minds and put them into a team, honing their intuition and working together towards a common goal. Related to Bill's talk, I was thinking of adversity and being in high-pressure situations and performing under pressure and having that eye on the goal and figuring out a way to do that, and to be a genius with action, and to be able to just have enough practice in you to know what the next move is. So I think that's part of our Tao cultivation, is just getting all of those necessary aspects of our lives together, so that when faced with situations, we can always just shoot for the prize, meaning higher cultivation and not human drama. That, there's a lot of it. This is where I get very ambivalent, especially about sports, where there's a lot of head-to-head combat and concussions. So before I get to that, there's a lot of issues that are very real regarding the NCAA, the college National College Athletic Association, in that there are a lot of very powerful individuals making a lot of money off of very young and maybe not so well represented students. It's a huge industry, and there's a lot of issues regarding the players being properly given their due for all the efforts that they're actually doing out on the field, and a lot of people making money off of them and not necessarily in a fair way. So I have some issues with that. In sports in general, there tends to be so many scandals. I was trying to list them all, and there's no point in really going into them other than the fact that people, bad behavior is often excused because they perform so well in the field, and maybe they make some money for lots of other individuals, and so very terrible behavior that should never be allowed in people, period, just gets overlooked because, well, he won that game the last night. They're expensive in terms of cities, footing bills for football stadiums and where the revenue goes and how much money actually gets pumped into these sports, both on the college level and on the national level. I have issues with that as well. And then, of course, the head injuries, which are very real and maybe trying to be brushed under the rug for some organizations, and hopefully there is a lot of changes being made. But fundamentally, these are dangerous contact sports, and as children get into them, I think we have to be cognizant of the risks and dangers. Not all of them will be able to go on to the NFL or the NBA or what have you, and yet they still face some risks in terms of being able to play and being injured and living with those consequences the rest of their lives. And of course, there's the transcendent, things that are unimaginable, like me being interested in a Super Bowl game, or the Seattle Seahawks, who, as you know, recently won the Super Bowl this year. So that flow that comes with practice and having the muscle memory to move through a play and working with your teammates in just those moments where everything connects properly. The community that winning teams actually engender in their cities, the city pride that comes from being champions. So we had a very interesting experience here with Seattle winning the Super Bowl and how excited people got. If you don't know, we collectively are known as the 12th man, being the other player on that team. So I'm just going to leave you with a few choice words from the Seattle Seahawks quarterback, Russell Wilson. Right after the Super Bowl, he was asked a couple questions, many questions, and here are some of the answers that he responded to. On how satisfying it feels to have won the Super Bowl, Russell said, "It's a true, true blessing. God is so good. We believed we would get here. At the beginning of the season, I told our guys, hey, why not us? We believed that we could get here. We had the talent. We had the coaching staff. We had the best fans in the National Football League. We wanted to win it all, and we just said, go 1-0. That was our mentality from the whole season. We continued to fight. We continued to grow together. We have great teammates, and I couldn't have done it without the guys." And finally, on reflecting if the strategy that he used was taken from the advice that his father had given him, Russell said, "Yeah, he used to always tell me, Russ, why not you? And what that all means was believe in yourself. Believe in the talent God has given you, even though you're 5'11", and you can go a long ways. That's why I decided to play football, and I wanted to go against the odds a little bit." So with that, I'm going to leave you with another Seattle superstar, letting me play out. Thank you, everyone.